Welcome to News Laundry Interviews. Today we have with us Barkha Dutt. Thank you so much, Barkha, for taking out the time for us to speak with us.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to be discussing your book. And of course, we're going to be discussing television journalism, what it is today and how it got here. We can't not talk about that with you. As we record this show, India has had about 5,000 COVID cases. We have had 34 deaths in the past 24 hours. But COVID is still, I think today it's out of our mind space for a lot of us. We don't think of it except for people who lost loved ones, especially during the second wave, like you did. And you write about that in the book. And I think maybe an unexplored story is the PTSD that a lot of survivors of COVID or people who've lost their loved ones in that time have gone through, because it wasn't just about losing someone to the virus or a pandemic, but the desperate circumstances around which it happened. You detail in your book the search for ambulance. A lot of people were desperately looking for oxygen, hospital beds. So I guess my first question to you is, how did covering the coronavirus, the second wave especially, change you as someone who was reporting the story and then as someone who also became the story?
By the time my father died at the end of April in 2021, I had become the COVID reporter. You know, I had traveled all across the country in the first wave by road, 30,000 kilometers. Even during the second wave, as airports opened, I was flying everywhere. In fact, I still remember when my sister called me and said that our dad was ill with COVID. I was between Gujarat and Maharashtra on the road outside a crematorium.
And we haven't actually really talked about this enough, is the attacks on medical workers.
Yes.
You mentioned in your book that the highest number of COVID-related attacks on medical workers anywhere in the world took place in India.
I remember interviewing a doctor's best friend in Chennai, who had kept trying to cremate his best friend, who was also a doctor, not cremate, rather bury him in the cemetery of his church. And this friend is recounting to me how they go to the church and there's a crowd of people all around who live in the residential areas, and they come and they throw stones and bricks at the ambulance, the hearse that is carrying the body, and they attack the wife and child of this doctor who's died, and they don't let the burial happen. Then they go to the next church and the same thing happens. And when this doctor was recounting the story to me, he was sobbing. He was just sobbing. And I just found that this happened to me twice in COVID. So those are the two times I wept on camera in an interview. Two doctors who got stoned. One was Hindu, one was Muslim. And our channels tried to create hatred even out of this incident, because the perpetrators in this case were Muslims. And these two women, I remember they came on, I was interviewing them, I'm sure you did as well, and they were like, we are best friends. Television certainly failed the COVID story.
Now, one of the criticisms you received during the coronavirus reporting was making yourself the story, where the criticism is basically this, that you have to tweet out, you know, for example, your workstation near the pavement. Do you have to tweet out that you're here? You know, the process of the story becoming a story itself.
So one is that I have learned something quite peculiar about myself, that I'm often the story, whether I want to be the story or I don't want to be the story. I'll come to
as one of the first stars of television news.
Yeah, but good and bad, both, right? Because I shared so much of that process that I think I got the following I did. Because people got interested in, where are you sleeping tonight?
Okay.
What do you eat? Strangers started sending me food. There was a lady in Bombay who said, I've just been seeing you in the same shirt now can I wash this shirt for you? I said, really? You would wash this shirt for me?
The shift that has happened, it is not as if television wasn't partisan. But today you're in an age of hyper-partisanship. The sort of discourse around minorities in our television news, is it ideological? Are anchors driven by, to your mind, is it ideological? Is it market forces defining that, okay, ye chal raha hai, to ye becho?
I'm old school enough to have a problem with the polarization per se.
Okay.
Right? Which means, of course, I can't bear the kind of hate mongering that takes place. You know, I did a column for the Washington Post whose tagline is democracy dies in darkness. And I said, in India, democracy dies in prime time. I said this in Hindi once. I said, the problem is कि हमारे पत्रकार या हमारी journalism जो है, उसमें या अब चमचा है या मोर्चा है. पत्रकार कहाँ है?
Your former organization has been in the news. NDTV's imminent takeover by Adani. Now, we at News Laundry had reported on this story around 2016, where we basically said that there's a vulnerability with RRPR, where there's a loan that has come from a Reliance Front company. And it essentially means that it could be turned into equity at any point. So there was this indebtedness to Reliance, so to speak. Now, you were at NDTV at that point. When you were there, was this ever a point of conversation with the Roys? The health of the company, the loan, what it could mean, and did it lead to Ambani or Reliance being a holy cow within the NDTV space?
Because I do not believe in judging people when they're down. I think that's not good grace. I think when I lashed out at them, they were powerful. I was, the person on the outside, and I felt much more free in saying what I thought. So I'm not going to say a lot of things I might have said in another context. But I will say this, that NDTV's employees, including its senior leadership, did not know about this loan till much later. I personally got to know about this loan from the Reliance at a time when they were, it should actually compel us to talk about the broken revenue models of TV news. The fact that this loan had to be taken, the fact that it was not paid back over 13 years, the fact that the loan very clearly stipulates that if you don't pay back the loan, we effectively can now or later own this percentage of the company. It's changed hands from one business baron to another business baron, which should make us step back and say, okay, is the only revenue model left in this country for business houses to run big TV channels? That is the conversation.
Or then government advertising.
Or government advertising, which we hardly ever speak about, right?
And you've seen the downfall of Congress and liberal Lutyens media, of which NDTV became the face. And you as an employee of NDTV also became the face of this liberal media that must be brought down, that is corrupt, that is too close to power. Cemented with the Radia tapes, where the central question was, why were you so close to power?
I was talking to a source, and the source was going to tell me, what a certain party was thinking about joining government or not.
Let me talk to him, talking to Ghulam. Did you really go and speak to Ghulam Nabi Azad?
No. And Ghulam Nabi issued a statement which nobody cared about, saying she never called me. The last time I spoke to her was when I was Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir.
That I saw.
And if you think journalists, politicians, corporates, people who you cultivate as sources for information do not talk like this, I think you have had recently Mr. Arnab Goswami's own WhatsApp chats leaked. You have had recently a former India Today correspondent's chats or phone call leaked when she went to Hathras.
But we criticized that, right? Like
you criticized the leak, you didn't criticize the content.
No,
this is the problem.
Content. We
this
had
is the problem.
long pieces on why that content was problematic.
And I am saying that all of it is problematic, and the journalists of India did this to themselves by judging other journalists on the Radia tapes. We have forever given away our right to privacy of conversation with a source. We have demolished it.
There is merit also to an ecosystem that calls each other out, because you're all in check.
I don't know.
Fairly.
How many stories have been done on Newslaundry?
I'm not saying
how
unfair.
many stories, for example.
We'd love to have people do it, but it's just that no one wants to report on the media, and then those who may want to do it would rather just send us court notices than do a story on us.
Yeah.
Mufat khoro, muft mein itna hi milega. To watch the full unedited interview, you have to subscribe to Newslaundry and pay to keep news free. Because when the public pays, the public is served. We depend on you and not on advertisers. So go to www.newslaundry.com/subscription and subscribe and get all our unedited interviews, our special video shows, comics, and everything that's behind the paywall. Remember, to subscribe to Newslaundry, you pay just about 10 rupees a day. That's less than, a cigarette. And smoking is injurious to health. So subscribe and watch the full interview.